Bonjour. Welcome to ChangeNOW. Welcome to this session live beneath the power of soils. My name is Pierre Girard. I am a journalist, a TV host, a video reporter for ARTE, the European, sorry, I'm French, but ARTE is European Public Television and Broadcast. And for my YouTube channel, TousTerriens, in English, Field Trip. And I'm specifically reporting about agriculture, science, environment, and I'm super happy to welcome you here for this session about living soils, the power of soils. I'm living in a city, but if you're looking for me, I'm usually filming outside of the city with the people who are actually working for the shift on the fields, on their farms. And just out of curiosity, I wanted to start this session by asking you, how many of you, just to quickly know who I'm talking to, willing to change now, how many of you are actually living in a city? Maybe you can just raise your hands. Okay. I would say it's quite a good representation of the worldwide population because nowadays 60% of humanity is actually living in a city. And I would say it's about more than half of the public, of the audience, who raised the hands. That means it's the first time in history that humanity is mostly living in cities, and we are slowly disconnecting from soils, from our from the farms and from the people who are actually working to grow our food and working for biodiversity and climate. And even here, in this city, in this precise place, it was called Plaine de Grenelle. It's built on a place here in the middle of Paris where it used to be the most important place for market gardening next to Paris. Because cities were built mostly close to water worldwide and close to the most fertile soils. And today, what happened in the 18th century in Paris is starting to happen everywhere in the world, even outside, because of urbanization, because we are building on fertile soils, and also because of climate change. I see it in each one of my reports. Soils are degrading. They are going away, losing their structure. They are washed away by rain and erosion. And this is why we are gathered here to exchange about solutions with very inspiring people. We are going to look how we can go back to soils, and and the good news is when you're going to farmers, then you find thousands, hundreds of ways to do that. I see it with farmers, with permaculture, for instance, with market gardening on living soils, with agroforestry. There are thousands of ways, thousands of names to talk about regenerative agriculture. And we will have a session divided into 3 parts. We will first have an inspiring keynote, then a panel discussion with 3 actors of change about living soils, and a fireside chat with the co-founder of Genesis, who is producing an indicator for soil health that could guide us in our action against soil degradation. And to inspire us in this fight for living soils, let me introduce you Philippe Birker. He co-founded the Climate Farmers and started a network of farms in Europe doing regenerative agriculture, with one goal: help farmers to scale it up, to scale regenerative agriculture up. Please welcome Philippe Birker on the stage.
Bonjour, everybody. It's a very unexpected pleasure for me to be here today. You all might have expected someone else. And I have to say, when I received an email from ChangeNOW on Saturday in order to come here and to replace Vandana Shiva, I went through quite a range of emotions. First, I was shocked, because how is it possible that someone like Vandana Shiva still has visa issues? I think that's completely unthinkable. Then came fear. How could I ever replace her? And then came excitement, because I decided to talk to you about something that I care very much about, and that I think we don't speak enough about. And that is systemic thinking, and the role that systemic thinking plays in achieving the change that we all want to see. And to kick things off with, I want to do a little exercise with you. Now, I see some of you are having pen and paper. That's great. Please take it out, because I will ask you now to make a quick sketch. How do you think or feel how the world works? If you have pen and paper, please make a sketch. If you don't have pen and paper, you can also just join me, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and imagine it. Okay, that'll be enough for the moment. Now I would love for those of you that made a sketch to show it to each other and to show it to your neighbors. And I think the number one thing that you will see, no one sketch will be the same as the other. Every single person here has a different worldview. And this is amazing, because we are in a bubble. We're all climate change interested. Most of us are from a European context, yet no one worldview is ever the same as another. And this is the first key message that I would love to give you for today. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, who is this guy? And what the hell does what he has to say have to do with soil and the power of soil? And my own love for soil developed in this location, which is a tiny little village in the central Portuguese countryside. In 2017, me and a few friends decided to purchase this, at that point, abandoned village. And that also what made me the steward of a few hectares of land. And that's when my journey started. First into permaculture, then into regenerative agriculture. Back in 2017, regenerative agriculture wasn't a thing yet. There was no one speaking about it. But all the knowledge that we have now was already there. I found papers from Wageningen University from the 80s and 90s already speaking about the power of carbon sequestration through regenerative agriculture. Dr. Ratan Lal, who's one of the leading soil scientists, already made a statement back then that if we would increase global soil carbon by only 2%, we would be able to sequester more carbon than we are emitting as a human species on an annual basis. Now let that one sink in. We have a solution to at least our carbon issue, but we're not acting upon it. We haven't been speaking about it, and it's still not happening at the scale where it should be. So I started looking into our agricultural system. And what I saw was really not pretty. Our agricultural system is fucked up. You all have seen the farmer protests in the last few months all over Europe. Those are just symptoms of a much bigger underlying issues. Over the last 50 years, farmers have consecutively been bashed in our agricultural system. A farmer nowadays, if you buy a liter of milk, gets 30 to 40% of the money that you're paying. Yet he does 90% of the labor. In the 70s, there was at least still 50 to 60%. So they're getting less and less money, while their costs are rising, and while they are the ones who are experiencing the effects of climate change the most. And they're left alone with that risk, and they're not getting paid for it. Which leads to the fact that farming is not sexy. Nobody puts being a farmer on their Tinder profile, nobody wants to become a farmer, and farmers are a dying out generation. They're in their late 50s, and there's no one to take their farms over. And that means we're full head towards a food crisis in the European Union. On top of that, we have a massive issue with the ecological impact on farming. Hopefully you all know the planetary boundaries, an amazing concept invented by the Club of Rome, who are also present here. And agriculture is one of the main reasons for us crossing these planetary boundaries. It's the #1 reason for biodiversity loss in the world, and it's responsible for 24% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Now remember, we could sequester carbon through agriculture, yet we are massively emitting it. And finally, you might think, at least it's driving an economy, right? But actually, if you look at the economic impact of agriculture, it's negative. Do you know why? because we have costs of agriculture which are not accounted for in our agricultural system. And those are health costs and environmental costs. The main company that's producing chemical fertilizer products is Bayer. You probably heard about glyphosate. We estimate that we have 11 billion euros in damages with health products. Who's selling you medicine? The same company that's selling the farmers the poison that made us sick in the first place. And we're supporting this, and we're subsidizing this in our system. It's crazy. So this is kind of where I was like, okay, how is this possible? We know regenerative agriculture, we know it builds biodiversity, we know it sequesters carbon, we know it helps with drought prevention and flooding prevention, because it also builds up healthy soils which soak up water, but it's not happening. And nobody is speaking about it. And that's where me and my co-founder Ivo started Climate Farmers in 2019, with one single goal: scaling regenerative agriculture in Europe and getting to at least 10% of all European farmland under regenerative management by 2027. 10%, because we believe at that point we have enough farms which can function as role models for other farmers, so that farmers can see a farm which is similar to their context, they can get inspired by it, and they can also jump on that train. And we believe once we get to 10%, we will have an avalanche effect, and we will get to 100%, because it's just purely logical once you have seen the magic and the power of regenerative agriculture in action. When we started, we estimate we had about 1,000 to 2,000 farmers doing regen ag. Now we have around 200,000. So we are 2%, still nothing out of the 10 million farmers that we have in the European Union. So still a long way to go. Our overall mission as climate farmers is to see a world where humans found their place within the larger ecosystem again. We believe humans are a keystone species, an honorable title that we share with beavers, for example, which means we have a larger than most other animals impact on our environment. Right now, we are destroying it. We're having a negative impact. We could turn this around, and we could have a positive impact. And we believe regenerative agriculture is the way to get there. So I went to business school in Maastricht. And what you learn in business school when you study entrepreneurship is, if you build a company, you laser focus on one thing, you get one thing right, and that's it. Everything else is just distracting. It's called linear thinking. It's what we all are doing. And in a linear thinking mindset, the logical thing would be farmers sequester carbon, there's a voluntary carbon market, so we generate carbon credits and we pay farmers. End of story, right? And then I went out, and I went on a one-year journey. And I visited 60 farmers in 9 countries, 60 regenerative farmers. And I asked them, how are you doing? What do you think could help you? What do you think about carbon credits? And I realized things are a lot more complex than that. Because the issue is, carbon credits won't fix it. Farmers which are already doing regenerative agriculture get often mobbed by their conventional colleagues, because their mindset is not there. The culture is not there. So they very often feel lonely. And they are even thinking of leaving the track, even though they see the results because of the social pressure. Farmers that are not on the track yet don't know how to do it. Regenerative agriculture is highly context-specific. And there's no education out there right now that is enabling farmers to learn how to apply regenerative agriculture in their context. There's no coaches, there's no trainers, there's no infrastructure. On top of that, the money for carbon is not enough to finance the transition. And farmers only get paid for yield. So they only get paid for maximizing their yield. If the yield goes down, they get less money, despite all the positive side effects. And on top of that, we have a massive issue with subsidies in the European Union, which are heavily influenced by the agrochemical industry and which pay the majority of money for farmers. So what do? We did a systems mapping, which basically means you look at who are the different actors in the agricultural field, how are they all interlinked with each other, and where are these acupuncture points that you need to push in order to make that happen. If you want to learn more about it, there's 2 amazing organizations out there which we are working with, which is the Presencing Institute and Reimagine Futures. Big shout out to both of them. In a systems map, what you have is you have hundreds of different feedback loops. And I'm just going to explain you one now as an example of all of the other ones. And this is the classic one which I already touched upon. We have a dominance of a conventional agriculture system. This dominance leads to several companies, such as Bayer and Syngenta, making massive amounts of money. Now, in our capitalist system, what do you do when you have a lot of money? You hire a lot of lobbyists, and you let these lobbyists influence politics. Bayer has the most amount of lobbyists of any organization in the world in Brussels. What does that lead to? Inadequate policy, because the politicians are obviously influenced by the lobbyists. What do? They pass laws that generate subsidies that give farmers money to buy more agrochemical products. Through that, the agrochemical companies make more money again, and we have a perfect loop of doom as it's running. This is one example. Trust me, there's a lot of other loops which are similarly depressive in that map, unfortunately. So where do you start? Donella Meadows is someone like the queen of systems thinking, and she came up with the leverage point for systems transformation. There's 3 key leverage points there, which is cultural, structural, and practical. The most impactful one is the cultural one. So this is where we began. And we started connecting the farmers. They were lonely, and they didn't know each other. You see my slowly balding hat on the right top, together with the regenerative wine farmer from Portugal. And we brought all of these farmers together, first online during the pandemic, and then in person. And then we organized a conference in London, Germany, where we organized farmers from 20 countries, as well as policy leaders, academics, industry leaders, businesses, to come together and to start thinking, who are the different players, and how can we form a web, and how can we work together to achieve the systemic change that we want to see. We also started coaching and trainings, online and offline, by farmers and for farmers, to inspire them to learn from each other and to have the strength to go on this journey to leave the path of conventional agriculture. By now, we have farmers across Europe, and we have a map where you can see all of them and how they can all be interacting with each other and connecting with each other, mostly through WhatsApp groups, because let's face it, that's where farmers are. Then we focus on the structural part. And last summer, I had a very happy moment because we were working with the Club of Rome together in order to work on the nature restoration law, the most progressive law to protect nature in Europe. And the far-right parties are working with the agrochemical industry to claim that farmers hate this law. That's not the case. So we collected more than 100 signatures from large-scale regenerative farmers across Europe, which all say, we love the nature restoration law because it gives us finally the basis to start paying farmers for biodiversity, which they don't right now. The law has been very watered down by now, but at least it's a step in the right direction, and it's a kind of action that we need to see. We also wrote a manifesto together with farmers from 21 countries, where farmers laid out what they think needs to happen to help them in adopting regenerative agriculture. And then, last year, we were involved in starting ARTE, which is the first lobby organization for regenerative agriculture, by farmers, for farmers, with farmers from 20 different countries. And then we have the practical ones. And here, we're focused on measuring, and we're focused on collecting data and figuring out how we can help farmers to understand the complexities of regenerative agriculture. In the center, we have a farm health report card, which is a tool for farmers to understand their own context better and how the transition to regen ag can look like for them. Around that, we have carbon credits. They're one tool in the toolbox. They're not the linear thinking solution, but they're one of the many things that are a tool to help farmers. And on top of that, we're currently developing a regenerative agriculture certification, similar to the organic certification, but outcome-based, not practice-based, and with farmers in mind. Farmers hate organic verification, and we need farmers to love the verification for them to engage in it. Now, the biggest issue here, and this is the other thing that I really want to leave you with, in the entire impact sector, we have a massive financing issue. When I started looking into impact startups, I found a lot of impact VCs, and I was like, oh, great, there's a lot of money available. The problem is, you get money for data. You get money for tech. Tech is sexy. Nobody gives you money for culture. Nobody gives you money for structural change. I haven't found a single VC that's actually interested in systemic investment. Into tech investment, which gives you a quick return on investment, excellent. You want to work on cultural stuff? Not really. That's a problem, because as you see on the scale, you need the cultural work and the structural work for the technical work to actually make a difference. Okay, so now you might be wondering, what does this mean for me? If you're an investor and you want to learn about systemic investment more, I would love to talk to you. If you're wanting any kind of organization and you want to learn about it, I would also love to talk to you. But most importantly, for every single person here, I would ask for you to ask yourself, where's your food coming from? How much money that you are spending for your food is ending up in the pockets where you want it to end up? And what can you change? It's very easy nowadays to get to know your farmers. The CSA is all over Europe, and you can start figuring out, how can I buy food that actually supports the right way of farming? And how can we all work together to make farming sexy again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philippe. For the inspirational keynote, and thank you also for putting the farmers in the middle of the process with climate farmers. We will now go straight to the solutions with three very inspirational panelists. Please join me, Sandrine, Alain-Richard, and Elena. You can come on the stage. With the jingle. Welcome on the stage of ChangeNOW. Sandrine Sommer, you are the Chief Sustainability Officer at Moët, Hennessy, which is within the luxury group LVMH, the direction of 27 houses worldwide for wine and spirits. And you started the program Living Soils, Living Together. Welcome, Sandrine. Alain-Richard Donwahi, welcome. You're the former Minister of Water and Forests in Côte d'Ivoire and environmental advocate and President of the United Nations COP15 against desertification. Welcome, Monsieur Donwahi. Elena Doms, welcome as well. You're the founder of the company Earth Plus. Earth Plus is a pioneer to restore degraded soils and combat desertification worldwide through, we would say, innovative regenerative agriculture. Is that correct?
Through combining different industries and combining agriculture and construction.
And construction. Thank you to all of you. But I would like to start with a question, Mr. Donwahi, because we heard Philippe talking about the farmers and talking about how difficult it is also to address decision makers. As the first president of a COP against desertification, you are the first president of a COP against desertification to put the soil degradation at the very top of the international political agenda. And since Abidjan in 2022, you were on a mission. How difficult was it to have this mission and to gather all the positive energy and to transform it into concrete change? How was this mission?
This mission is very difficult. At the beginning, I thought I was on vacation because I travel a lot around the world, and I found it very tiring today to travel so much. It was difficult because, first of all, our COP was not very well known, Desertification COP. We have 3 COPs in the world, Climate COP, Biodiversity COP, and Desertification. When I was Minister of Water and Forest, I didn't know about the Desertification COP. I would participate every year to the Climate COP, but I didn't even know there was a Desertification COP. When I became president of that COP, I realized that soil degradation, land degradation, is at the core of the problem of climate change and the core of the problem of biodiversity loss. So the most important thing was to talk to be an advocate to the political world, so the leaders understand what is important. It's not important to have big meetings only. It's not important to talk about the problem. It's important to really go to the core of the problem and make things change. That is the most difficult thing. And I've been traveling a lot, and what I noticed is that there is the will. There's a will to change. There's a will. That's no problem. There's a will. Big declaration, there's a will. There's money to make things change. But do we want to put the money where we need to put it? That's the problem.
Would you say that the decision makers, the leaders you're talking about, are aware that living soils is a non-renewable resource?
Yeah, they know about it. No trouble. I was in a meeting not long ago about security. I've been Minister of Defense also before, about security. Food security, but security and jihadism, around the world. And when I was in the defense and military world, I've seen how easy it is when we have a problem to find the money to buy weapons, to go to war. It's easy. It's quick. And you will notice that in Europe, with the Ukraine war, in 1 week, it was easy to find 100 billion euros to cope with that problem. And when we talk about environment, when we talk about degraded land, we're striving to find the resources. So we have the resources, but do we need, do we want to put it where it's needed? I think it's a question also of sensitization of the population. The communities are the ones who can make things change. In the population, the youth are the people who can make things change. Because the youth, I found the youth very interested in the environment problems, soil degradation, land degradation. And they know what to do. But sometimes they are not at the right place. So we'll try for the next COP, COP16 in Saudi Arabia, to have the youth being part of the decision that are taken at that COP. It's very, very, very important.
And what do you use as a COP15 president to convince leaders to put money on this topic?
Well, it's not very difficult to convince them. But it's difficult to have the mechanism, to have the money go to the communities. You know, that's why I try to have the private sector more involved in it. Because usually the public sector is slow, very slow, and not adapted to fast solutions, to fast financing and fast solutions. So the private sector is more adapted, and the private sector is also interested in finding solutions. Because in farming, it's the private sector. You know, in the economy, the private sector is really affected by climate change, by soil degradation, and biodiversity loss. So we need to have these people more interested. And in Côte d'Ivoire, for example, we did something very interesting. We find it interesting to have the private sector investing in reforestation, investing in land protection. As long as it's investment, then they understand. You know, it's easier to make them understand.
I would be super curious to know, so because you're traveling a lot, you said.
Yeah.
What is the trend right now about regenerative agriculture? You know, what is the trend worldwide? Yeah. I mean, we're talking about crop rotation, about covering the soil. Do you see regenerative agriculture a lot when you're traveling around? Is it?
Yeah, there's a change. There's some countries around the world, around the globe, who are doing so. But I'd be interested to listen to the other speakers. But there's some countries who have understood that it's more efficient to use, in fact, it's traditional habits that needs to be put back into the current uses in agriculture, for example. In Cuba, they use it. In Australia, they do it. In Kenya also, and in Senegal. You know, there's a lot of projects, like the Great Green Wall project in Africa, where the communities are using regenerative techniques to farm and have good yields, you know, and protecting the soil at the same time.
So we definitely need to connect all these solutions, all these projects, and this is part of what you're doing, Sandrine Sommer, at Moët Hennessy, overseeing 27 worldwide maisons or houses of wines and spirits. In 2020, you structured a sustainability program called Living Soils, Living Together. So we are at this connecting together. This was around 4 commitments. Can you tell us a bit more about how it works within the maisons of Moët Hennessy right now?
Yeah, sure. First of all, you know, the private sector is very interested in this topic. I confirm, Mr. Donwahi. So at Moët Hennessy, we have 27 maisons. We are selling champagne, cognac, still wine, and sparkling wine all over the world. Yes. You know, and the common think we are deeply connected with soils, with nature. All our products are coming from there. So it's very important, and it's the reason why we have developed this program, Living Soils, Living Together. And the first pillar of this program is how to regenerate soils everywhere. Of course, in our own vineyard, but much beyond. So what we are concretely doing, first of all, we have been working on this subject for a long time. It's not new. And the first thing was to decrease drastically our environmental impact and decrease the quantity of input because this is very important, you know. And on our own vineyard, we are now 100% herbicide-free. And we really want to, of course, convince and involve our wine growers, our partners, to do the same. So it was the first step, very important step, and you can imagine it's not so easy to change the system like that, so we need time, and we have decided to go further, and not only to decrease our environmental impact, but regenerate, of course, nurture the soils. And this is the reason why we switch to, time after time, into regenerative agriculture, with 3 practices, concrete practices: cover cropping, you mentioned it, very important to always cover the soils and to have no naked soils. Very important to be sure, you know, you can again nurture the soil. So this is the first practices we implement all over the world. The second practices is agroforestry, so it means we plant some hedges, some trees around our area and within cross the terroirs, and particularly in Champagne or in Charente for our cognac maison. We are testing these new practices. And the third practices is eco-grazing. So using ships for the herb. You know, very important, of course, to reintroduce fauna and flora and push biodiversity within our vineyard and again around. And you mentioned reforestation. We are investing in reforestation as well. And we imagine pocket forests when we can. We imagine biodiversity islet around our terroirs. And we are investing as well in forest reforestation all over the world, in Africa, in the US, or in China, with our different maisons.
And it's huge when you think about how big Moët is, what you can put in movement as well. You told me when we were preparing this session that, of course, each one of the 27 maisons had a program already, but you brought them together. How did they react when you set these very ambitious goals? How did they react?
I think, you know, again, all our maisons have been working for a long time on this subject. It's not new, and you know, to create this program and to be sure to give the right ambition, challenge ambition, because we want to be 100% in regenerative agriculture by 2030. Not so far, 2030, very close to us. So. Of course, we have to switch to accelerate, and it's not so easy, but we keep, of course, the way. And all our maisons were very happy, you know, to have this direction, even if it's, again, very ambitious, but all are very happy to follow this regenerative agriculture. You know, it gives a lot of sense. And I think we have never forget that, again, our program is living together, the human part, very, very important when you are talking about soils. In fact, you are talking about farmers and about, of course, wine growers. Philippe told us just before, very important to keep in mind. This is the precious thing they work with. Mm-hmm. So we have all to be cautious with this precious ecosystem.
Yeah, and you say not so easy. I would say very ambitious, and I like it. Sandrine. We can maybe talk to you, Elena, about your company, Health Plus, which is also very ambitious. Your goal is to work on degraded soil and to build on it to grow construction materials. And you wanted to start in Europe, in Belgium. why did you choose to start your worldwide work in Belgium? Tell us a bit more about it.
So we work on two types of soils. These are the mildly polluted lands and degraded agricultural lands. And Belgium is unfortunately one of the most polluted countries in the world. It also has a lot of degraded agricultural soils. And we started with a project in Belgium, led by my colleague Frederik Verstraete. It was one of the first projects in the world to try to clean forever chemicals from soils with super plants, like industrial hemp. In that project, they proved the impossible, that you can use super plants and they will extract the pollution, even the most difficult ones, and they would store the pollution in the leaves of the plant. Then you can separate the leaves, treat them in a special process to get rid of the pollution, but the stems and the pollen remain completely clean. There were no traces of pollution at all. So those were used to create better construction materials that would actually be cheaper and stock carbon in buildings, turning construction from a huge carbon emitter into a huge carbon sink. And after that pilot, we thought, well, what else can we help fix with that business model? Turns out that we can clean mildly contaminated areas, but we can also work on degraded lands. And if you work with farmers, if they plant our crops as rotation crops, they will restore their soils and have larger main yields by 5 to 15% at least. And then we can take the biomass and make better construction materials at the same time. And we thought it was an amazing business model. That's why we started in Belgium. We are scaling now in Europe, but also in Africa in the upcoming months. And there we believe we can really work with local communities, make everybody better, help restore the lands, help build better or make local materials that are really important, and also elevate the local populations. This way we can really truly create a win-win-win for everybody and not wait for the policy, but have a business model that drives restoration at the same time.
You're working on how many hectares right now?
So for this year, we have over 10,000 hectares upcoming.
Wow, this is huge. This is huge. So you of course, growing construction materials and not food because you're working mostly on polluted soil, right? This the reason?
So the polluted soils are one type of solution, and they need to be treated differently.
Yes.
The degraded soils, when they're not contaminated, are other ones, and those are the majority of the soils that we have for this year. They are not polluted, they're just slightly degraded, and we can help bring them back.
Monsieur Donwahi, do you think this solution Elena is telling us about, this solution with Earth Plus, could help us to push back desertification?
Yes, I already asked Elena to come to Côte d'Ivoire, so we can have.
Great.
Yeah, you can try this over there. Yeah, I think it can work, and it's solutions that can make the communities really more efficient in agriculture, of course, but also more resilient in the community, because in the rural areas you have a lot of displacement of populations with degraded land. You see, so it could help fix the population on the ground in the rural areas. So it's very interesting.
Thank you, Mr. Donwahi. We need supportive people like you.
So this is a discussion you're having here?
Yeah. And we'll have this discussion afterwards.
Great. This
so
is
to make
change,
sure we can put it on the ground. Yeah.
Change happening at ChangeNOW, on stage. This is great. How would it look like, Elena, in Côte d'Ivoire? How could it look like in Côte d'Ivoire, your solution with Earth Plus? Give us a picture of it.
Of course. So every time it depends on the local population and what is most needed and on the type of soils. So we will for sure look which soils are there, see what are the best plants to grow and what are the solutions that we can implement. Whether it will be construction materials, can be a combination of construction materials and food. Because, for example, with plants like hemp, you can use the stems for the construction materials, but you can use the flowers and the seeds for very nutritious hemp oil. It's called a superfood by the UN. So you can combine solutions, but you can also make, for example, pellets for cooking. And there is a lot of problems when a lot of global population is still using wood for cooking. Now, we don't need to cut trees, and we can create the local economy and save the trees where they are to regulate the climate. So it will always depend, and we will analyze the state and the lands available in Côte d'Ivoire or in other countries in Africa and come up with the best solution that makes everybody win.
Great. And do you own these lands, or I mean, who's owning the soil you're growing on in this case?
It absolutely depends on the setup. It can be local farmers, it can be companies. So it really depends.
Right. Cool. And connecting people together, Sandrine, Sommer, it's also what you're doing, because besides what you're doing within the 27 maisons of Moët Hennessy, you also created a forum, the World Living Soils Forum, 2 years ago, and the second edition is going to take place this October in Arles, in southern France. Whom would you like to reach with this forum? The decision makers, your competitors, the farmers? Who's the public? Who's the audience?
Both.
Both?
Yeah, very important, to gather everybody, as I mentioned before, and we all know that it's not an easy subject, and we have to use collective intelligence to go further. So this is the reason why we created this forum dedicated on soil regeneration, 2 days, 30 hours of discussion, and we invite all the stakeholders around soils, as you mentioned, so NGOs, farmers for sure, wine growers, companies, institutions, and students, solutions, and the next edition will be co-organized by ChangeNOW.
Yes.
Very important with ChangeNOW. Very important, of course, to bring some solutions, some startup to innovate on this subject and to work all together and to share the state of art regarding soils, regarding soil health. To be sure we adapt our measurement. We choose the same type of measure for the soil health. And very important, again, to gather the different communities all along the value chain. And you mentioned competitors. For sure, we are working with our competitors because, again, the soil is a common ground, so very important to work together. And yesterday, for example, Pernod Ricard was exactly at the same place to explain what do they want. And very important, again, to work together. Very important, of course, because we have the same partners, the same wine growers we are working with. So, of course, we have to go in the same direction and to help everybody to go in the same direction. And again, as you mentioned as well, we have to use our leadership, to lead the way on this subject, and again, to be sure to gather all the people who are very touched with the soils.
So I guess you're all invited in October for the World Living Soils Forum, is that correct? October?
Yes, yeah? And definitely, just before this session, we talk together, and you can be sure that I hope you will be there, Elena and Alain-Richard, you will be there for the next edition in October. So it's in the south of France.
I missed the first one. I will definitely be there for the second one.
You will be there as well. Yeah.
And is it happening on a farm? Taking place on a farm? I didn't ask you before.
No, it's not. It will be so in Luma Foundation, so not far from
soil.
From soils, but it's a good point. We really want to focus on what we call case study, the reality, the whale soil. So this is the reason why we have decided during the next edition to have focus on specific terroir. We love to speak about terroir with wine and spirit. And we will have a focus, for example, from Provence, and the rosé de Provence, and the farmer from Provence, and they all will come and talk together, but again, with the different stakeholders, private sector, for sure, but as well public sector, citizens, students, solution, and a lot of different topics regarding soil, regenerative agriculture, for sure, but water, very important to address this topic as well. Everything and everything is for sure connected with soils.
Yes, and because you're talking about this knowledge, how do you assess the results of your program? How do you know this is working, this is not working, what we're doing within the 27 houses?
Because we only progress when we can measure everything. And as you know, sometimes it's not so easy to find the right KPI, particularly when you are talking about biodiversity, when you are talking about soil health. So we are working with different partners to find the right measurement and to be sure to have what we call the T0 and year after year to measure our progress. And within this topic, for example, we are working with Genesis. And Genesis is suggesting, but I think
we will talk about it now. Thank you to all the three of you for this very inspiring discussion about living soils, this very concrete example, and this change happening right here on the stage. Thank you. Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Monsieur Donwahi. Thank you, Sandrine.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. I think I will keep your mic. Is that correct? Yes. And I will call our next speaker for the fireside chat, and we will deep into this assessment. We will just talking about with Sandrine. Adrienne de Malleray, please applause. Please applaud. I don't see her. She's here. Welcome, Adrienne. You can come here, right next to me.